She thought he would amputate her glued arm. But humans don't give up that easily, a HFY sci-fi story. The alien ship had descended from the stars, an imposing structure of blackened metal, humming with energy. The crew of explorers, barely prepared for the encounter, had stumbled into something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Laria had been part of the ground crew sent to investigate the anomaly. She hadn't expected to come face to face with an alien species, let alone one that would leave her in this predicament. Her arm was stuck, completely glued to a massive steel wall inside the ship's medical bay. The adhesive wasn't just any normal bond. It was a substance designed to withstand the strength of an entire planet's gravity. No matter how much she struggled, how many times she tried to pry it loose, the arm wouldn't budge. The alien standing beside her, a tall, dark being with multiple eyes that glowed an eerie shade of blue, looked at her with a calm, unbothered expression. It didn't understand her language, but it didn't need to. The look in its eyes said it all. I'm not here to help you. Laria gritted her teeth in pain as she tried again to free herself. The arm was beginning to throb in agony. She could feel the blood circulation slowing in the trapped limb, but the alien's indifferent stare made her blood boil. It had been hours since they first captured her. She could see the faint outlines of her fellow crew members in the distance, some still conscious, others having already been taken by the aliens. A sense of isolation wrapped around her, but there was something inside her, a fierce drive, that refused to give in. The alien made a slow motion toward its belt, pulling out a sleek, curved instrument, a tool she recognized instantly as a surgical knife. The sight of it made her stomach churn, but it also triggered a surge of clarity in her mind. It wasn't the first time she had been in a desperate situation, and if there was one thing she had learned from humans, it was this: we never give up. You think you can just cut me off, don't you? She muttered under her breath, trying to keep her voice steady. The alien tilted its head, clearly unfamiliar with the language, but it understood the meaning of her tone. Its mandibles twitched. Without hesitation, it reached down, preparing to slice through her arm where it was bound. But humans, Laria thought, we always find a way. In a burst of adrenaline, Laria's free hand shot up, grabbing a nearby medical tool, a jagged shard of some alien glass. She didn't think, she just acted. Her mind raced with survival instincts. She slammed the shard against the adhesive, using the sharp angle to break it open. The bond didn't release immediately, but it weakened. The alien paused for a moment, its multiple eyes flicking between her and the cracking surface of the glue. It was uncertain now, sensing something in her eyes, something it hadn't expected. Laria's arm started to pull free, slowly, agonizingly, but it was moving. The alien had underestimated her. Then, with a roar of triumph, Laria wrenched her arm away. The final bond snapped, sending her falling back onto the cold floor. She lay there for a second, breathing heavily, her mind still processing the shock of escape. But the alien was moving again, this time faster. It didn't seem to be interested in anything but ending her. The surgical knife gleamed in its grasp. But as it lunged toward her, Laria grabbed another shard of glass and, with a quick movement, thrust it toward the creature's chest. The blade sank deep, its energy shield sparking in retaliation, but the alien's attack faltered. It stumbled back. Laria could hear the low hum of the ship around her, the engine's pulsing vibration filling her chest. She didn't have much time. Every instinct told her to fight, to survive. Not today, she whispered to herself, not today. The creature staggered, injured but still alive. It made one final attempt to reach her, but she had already grabbed a nearby weapon, a gun, one of the stolen tools from her crew's storage. She fired in a blur of motion. The blast sent the alien crashing into the far wall, incapacitated. She stood, wincing in pain but resolute. Her arm, now freed, was still stiff, but she could move it, and that was all that mattered. She turned to the door, where she could hear the sounds of movement, her crew, perhaps, or other dangers. Laria's gaze steeled. She would not give up. She would not be a victim of these invaders. Humans don't give up that easily. Laria took a steadying breath and moved quickly toward the door, using the wall for support as her freed arm pulsed with lingering pain. The alien ship was cold, its metal walls eerily silent now that the creature she'd just killed had stopped making noise. But she knew this wasn't over. The alien race wasn't one to leave their enemies alive for long, especially not after an encounter like this. As she reached the door, a low mechanical whir sounded from above her. She glanced up, instinct telling her to duck. A hidden compartment in the ceiling opened, revealing another of the multi-eyed aliens. Its body sleek and humanoid, yet distinctly different in shape. This one carried what looked like a heavy energy cannon, its long limbs giving it a fluid grace as it aimed directly at her. Laria didn't hesitate. She grabbed a nearby alien rifle and fired off a burst, hitting the creature square in the chest. It staggered backward but didn't fall. The weapon was clearly designed for extreme durability. Still, the hit seemed to phase it, giving her the precious seconds she needed to act. She dashed toward the nearest exit, hoping to escape the ship before more of them arrived. As she ran, she heard the echo of footsteps behind her, the unmistakable sound of other aliens in pursuit. She glanced over her shoulder to see two more creatures, larger and more heavily armored than the first, moving swiftly toward her. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. I can do this. I've survived worse. She entered a narrow hallway, the walls pulsating with energy as if the ship itself were alive. At the far end of the hall, she spotted a control panel, one that looked promising. If she could override the ship's systems, she might be able to disable the internal defenses or at least create a diversion. Laria dashed toward it, sliding to a stop in front of the console. Her fingers flew across the alien interface, struggling to decipher the symbols as they blinked before her. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But she didn't need to understand it completely. She just needed to make it work. Suddenly, she heard the heavy thuds of boots behind her. She turned just in time to see the armored aliens charging down the hallway, weapons raised. With no time to waste, she slammed her hand against the console, sending a surge of energy into the system. Sparks flew from the control panel as the ship's alarms blared to life. The lights flickered, the walls trembled. The aliens paused, clearly confused by the sudden malfunction. It was the opening Laria needed. She grabbed a metal rod from the floor and swung it toward the first alien, catching it off guard. The rod slammed into its side, knocking it off balance. Before it could recover, she twisted and fired the rifle again, this time targeting the second alien. The shot found its mark, sending the creature into a heap on the floor. Breathing heavily, Laria sprinted toward the exit, her mind racing with plans. She had to get back to her crew. They needed to regroup and escape. The ship wasn't going to let her go without a fight, but she was determined. Outside, the blackened sky stretched wide, the alien landscape stretching before her in a dark and barren expanse. But there, in the distance, she could see the glimmering outline of their shuttle, the ship that had brought them here, the shuttle that could take them back home. She had made it this far. She wasn't about to give up now. Laria moved quickly, keeping low and using the natural cover provided by jagged rocks and sparse vegetation. But even as she ran, she knew it wouldn't be long before the aliens figured out where she was. And then, she saw it, a shadow darting in her peripheral vision. Another alien, this one more monstrous in shape, emerged from the shadows, its body covered in armored plates that gleamed like black obsidian. It was larger than any she had encountered so far. It had been waiting for her. Before she could react, it lunged, its powerful claws extending in a deadly arc toward her. But Laria was faster. She sidestepped, barely avoiding its grasp. She had learned long ago how to face overwhelming odds and how to survive against creatures that outmatched her in size and strength. It was all about using their weaknesses, exploiting the moment when they underestimated you. Laria crouched low, feeling the weight of the weapon in her hands. As the creature's claws swiped past her, she aimed for the exposed joint between its armored plates and fired. The blast hit its target with a sickening crack. The creature howled, its movements erratic. But Laria was already in motion. She took advantage of its momentary confusion, sprinting toward a nearby rock formation for cover. She could hear the alien's heavy breathing behind her, but it was too slow to follow. She turned the corner just in time to see her shuttle in the distance, her only hope for survival. The shuttle's hatch opened, and a voice called out from inside. "Laria, you made it." It was Captain Voss, his face etched with concern but relief shining in his eyes. "I'm not out of the woods yet," she shouted back, turning to fire one last shot at the pursuing alien. Get ready to move, Captain. I need us airborne in 5 minutes. Understood, he replied. Laria ran the final stretch, her pulse hammering in her ears. She jumped into the shuttle, the doors sealing behind her with a mechanical hiss. The engines roared to life, and the craft lifted off, carrying them away from the alien ship. As they broke through the atmosphere and into the void of space, Laria leaned back in her seat, her body exhausted but her resolve unshaken. We made it, she whispered. And as the stars stretched out before her, she knew that humanity's will to survive could never be underestimated. Humans don't give up that easily. The shuttle's engines hummed with a steady rhythm as Laria collapsed into her seat, her body bruised, exhausted, and still tingling with the adrenaline of her escape. Her arm throbbed with a dull ache from where the alien adhesive had once held it captive, but that pain was nothing compared to the satisfaction of surviving. Captain Voss glanced over at her from the pilot's seat. You did good, Laria. We almost lost you there. Laria's eyes flickered to the control panel in front of him, watching as the shuttle sped farther and farther away from the alien planet, leaving it behind. A mixture of relief and grim determination settled in her chest. We're not out of the woods yet, Captain, she said. We can't assume they'll let us go so easily. They'll be after us. Voss nodded, his fingers flying over the console. I'm aware. I've already sent out a distress signal. We'll be able to link up with the rest of the fleet once we hit the outer rim. Laria's mind raced. She wanted nothing more than to relax, to let herself forget the horrors she'd just endured. But there was no time. They weren't safe yet. She still had the alien ship on her mind. The fleet of ships that would soon be searching for any trace of their shuttle. The aliens had to know they were gone by now. And if they were anything like the legends of ruthless conquerors, they'd stop at nothing to track them down. Laria turned to her side and began scanning the communications panel for any signs of pursuit. No signs yet, but she had no illusions about how much time they had before the aliens would find them. You think we're the only ones they've captured? She asked, her voice steady but heavy with a weight she couldn't shake. Voss shook his head. From what I've heard from the others, they've been abducting humans for a while now. Other ships, other crews. They're building something. Laria, we're just a small part of it. Her breath caught in her throat. A feeling of dread crawled up her spine as she pictured those massive, cold ships hovering over helpless worlds, taking people without mercy. The aliens weren't just here to conquer, they were here to build. And we're just supposed to let them get away with it? She asked, meeting Voss's eyes in the rearview mirror. Voss's eyes narrowed. We're humans. We don't let anything go unchallenged. If they think they can come into our space and make us slaves, they're about to find out just how wrong they are. Laria nodded, her resolve hardening. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about stopping these aliens from hurting anyone else. She couldn't afford to think only of herself. There were others out there, on other worlds, who needed to know what she knew. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. As they neared the outer rim of the system, Laria's thoughts turned to her fellow crew members. She was certain they weren't the only ones who had survived the encounter. If they could make it to the fleet and rally support, they had a chance to strike back. Suddenly, the ship's console beeped, signaling an incoming transmission. Voss's fingers hesitated above the controls before he pressed the accept button. The screen flickered, revealing a familiar face. Captain Voss. Laria, came the voice over the speaker. It was Lieutenant Hawk, one of the senior officers from the ground crew. Her face was tense, eyes dark with the stress of the situation. Liaison Hawk, what's the situation on your end? Voss asked, leaning forward. Hawk's expression was grim. We've managed to regroup. Some of the crew is still down on the planet, hiding out. But the aliens? They've mobilized a fleet. We've got intel that they're preparing to leave the system. Laria's heart dropped. They're not just going to let us escape, are they? No, Hawk confirmed. And they've already started sending out recon ships. We're not going to be able to shake them. But we're not just running. Captain, we've got a plan. Voss leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. We've intercepted part of their communication network. Hawk continued, her voice low but charged with purpose. It's not just one ship. They've been gathering resources, setting up bases on multiple planets across the galaxy. And there's one thing we've learned from their chatter. They have something powerful, something we can use to fight back. Laria's eyes narrowed. What are we talking about? Hawk's face flickered with a mix of hope and fear. A weapon unlike anything we've ever seen. It's what they've been building, what they're trying to use to wipe us out. But if we can find it first, if we can use it against them, we might stand a chance. Voss exchanged a look with Laria. The weight of the situation hung between them. We can't just run anymore, Laria said, her voice firm. We need to take the fight to them. Hawk's image nodded in agreement. Exactly. We'll need every ship we can muster, every weapon in our arsenal. But if we can infiltrate their base, get to the weapon before they activate it, we can turn the tide in this war. The captain gripped the controls, his jaw set. It's time to take the fight to them. We can't let them win. We'll link up with the rest of the fleet. We're going to hit them hard. Laria stood, feeling the strength returning in her veins. There was no going back now. The fight wasn't just for survival, it was for everything humanity stood for. We'll need a team, she said, already making a mental list of what they would need to do. We'll assemble it, Voss replied. Prepare for battle, Laria. This is only the beginning. As the shuttle broke through the outer atmosphere, the stars ahead of them grew larger and more vivid. In the silence of space, Laria could hear her heartbeat echo in her ears. The war had begun, and humanity wasn't going to back down. Humans don't give up that easily. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as they entered the deeper reaches of the galaxy, the vast emptiness of space stretching out before them. Laria leaned back in her seat, her thoughts racing. The weight of the situation was undeniable now. They weren't just running from the alien threat. They were gearing up for a full-scale war. She could feel the fire in her chest, the need to strike back, to protect humanity from this invasive enemy. They would have to be quick, precise. The aliens had the advantage of numbers and technology, but they didn't have humanity's most powerful weapon, the will to fight, to resist, to win against all odds. Laria could already feel the stirring of that indomitable spirit in her, and she knew it was shared by every person on board this shuttle. Captain, we're approaching the rendezvous point with the fleet, came the voice of the communications officer. It was Lt. Reynolds, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of tension. We should be in range of the main fleet in about 15 minutes. Voss nodded, his eyes fixed on the star-streaked view ahead. Keep an eye out for anything unusual. The aliens know we're alive, and they won't stop until they've wiped us out. Laria's gaze shifted to the display in front of her. The system map flickered, showing the ships spread out in the void, their course set for the alien-controlled sector where their weapon was rumored to be. It was a massive risk, but they had no choice. If they didn't act now, the aliens would have the upper hand, and humanity's chances of survival would dwindle. What's the status on the weapon intel? Laria asked, turning toward Voss. We've got a lead, Voss replied, tapping a few commands into his console. Lieutenant Hawk has confirmed that the weapon is housed in a fortified structure on one of the moons of the alien homeworld. If we can get close enough, we should be able to infiltrate the base. Laria clenched her fists. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. Infiltrating the alien base was only the first step. They'd have to fight through waves of soldiers, overcome high-tech defenses, and secure the weapon before the aliens could activate it. It was a suicide mission if there ever was one, but that didn't scare her. Nothing scared her anymore. How many ships are we getting to back us up? She asked, her voice low but determined. Voss hesitated, then looked at her with a hard expression. We're getting 4 ships. It's all we can spare right now. The rest are spread out, keeping the aliens distracted, waiting for a chance to strike when we do. Laria's mind churned. 4 ships wasn't much. They were going to be vastly outnumbered, but this was humanity's best shot. If they didn't take down the weapon, if they didn't stop the aliens now, they'd never get another chance. She turned to the tactical station and pulled up the schematics of the alien base. It was heavily fortified, designed to withstand attacks from all directions. But that was precisely why it might have a weakness. If they could strike fast and hard enough, they could catch them off guard. They would need precision, speed, and the element of surprise. We'll need to move in under the radar, Laria said, her mind racing through possible strategies. Hit them where they least expect it. We can't let them know we're coming until it's too late. Voss nodded, his jaw clenched. Agreed. But we can't go in blind. We need to know everything about that base. Any intel we can gather, we take. Suddenly, the communications console beeped again, and Lt. Reynolds's voice crackled through the speakers. Captain, we've got incoming ships, at least a dozen of them. Looks like the aliens are onto us. Laria's heart skipped a beat. They found us. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Voss ordered, his tone sharp. Get ready for a fight. Reynolds, patch me into the fleet. A few moments later, Voss's voice echoed through the shuttle's comms. This is Captain Voss of the Resolute. We've got hostile ships closing in. All fleet ships. Engage at will. We can't afford to hold back. Laria's breath quickened as she felt the tension in the air. The alien ships were coming in fast, their dark silhouettes cutting through the stars. She could see them on the radar now, sleek, menacing ships designed for speed and firepower. The battle was inevitable. Get ready, everyone, Laria said, gripping the seat's armrests. We're going to make sure they know what it means to mess with humanity. The shuttle lurched as the first volley of laser fire from the alien ships came through, striking their shields and sending shockwaves through the craft. Laria's teeth clenched as the shuttle bucked under the force. The Resolute veered, narrowly avoiding another round of incoming fire. We've got their attention, Voss called out, his voice calm but intense as he expertly maneuvered the shuttle through the barrage. Keep your heads in the game. This is our chance. The first alien ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, the Resolute's weapons firing on all cylinders as they blasted through the alien craft's shields. One ship down, 11 to go. Laria's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment they had to push through, to show the aliens they weren't just going to lay down and die. Another explosion rocked the shuttle as a blast tore through its side. The hull groaned under the stress, but the shields held for now. She could hear the sounds of the battle raging outside, the hum of weaponry, the cries of the crew as they fought back. How much farther to the weapon? Laria shouted to Voss, her eyes glued to the tactical readout. We're almost there, he answered, his voice tense. Hold on a little longer. Laria looked at the chaos unfolding around them. The fleet was engaged in a fierce firefight, their ships flaring in bursts of color as they exchanged fire with the enemy. The alien ships were fast and relentless, but the humans were fighting with everything they had. This was humanity at its finest, facing down the impossible, refusing to surrender. Laria could see the target now, the alien moon, dark and foreboding in the distance, orbiting their homeworld. She knew what came next. They were going in. They had no choice. We make our move now, Laria said, standing up with newfound determination. Once we're on the moon, we go in hard and fast. We get that weapon, and we use it to end this war before it starts. Voss nodded, turning the shuttle toward the moon's surface. The rest of the fleet followed in tow, determined to do whatever it took to stop the alien menace. As the moon loomed larger in front of them, Laria felt the fire in her chest flare up once more. They had come this far, and they wouldn't stop until they had one. Humans don't give up that easily. And today, they were going to prove it. The shuttle's descent was sharp, the cold expanse of space rapidly giving way to the jagged surface of the alien moon below. Laria could see the base now, an imposing structure made of dark metal, built into the moon's craggy surface like a wound in the landscape. The enemy was expecting them, but what they didn't know was that humanity's resilience could turn the tide in the most unlikely of moments. Everyone, brace yourselves, Captain Voss's voice crackled over the comms. We're going in hot. The shuttle's engines roared to life, cutting through the atmosphere as they descended into the narrow canyon that led directly to the base. The air outside was dense with alien technology, the atmosphere thick with the signature electromagnetic pulses of the alien shields. Laria gripped the edge of her seat, ready for anything. She muttered under her breath. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, and she forced herself to focus on the task ahead. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about wiping out the alien threat before they had the chance to bring their weapon online. Shields at 85%. Reynolds's voice came in through the comms. We'll make it, but we'll need to get in and out fast. The shuttle dipped lower, and suddenly, the base was right in front of them. Massive hangar doors loomed, ready to close. The shuttle's exterior shook under the weight of incoming fire, the shields flashing violently with each strike. A heavy boom rattled the ship's frame. We're not going to make it through those doors if we don't act fast, Laria shouted, her voice hard and commanding. Hold on, Voss said as he leveled the shuttle just below the open doors. Laria's mind raced. We're gonna have to breach it manually. The hatch to the shuttle opened, and before the ship had even fully stopped, Laria was out, hitting the ground running. The others followed swiftly, disembarking as fast as they could. The air around them was cold, heavy with the alien atmosphere. In the distance, she could see shadows moving, alien soldiers, already converging on their location. Move, Laria shouted. Take positions. The team quickly split into 2 squads, each taking a different route toward the heart of the base. Their mission was clear: get to the control room, disable the weapon, and stop the alien advance before it was too late. But the problem wasn't just the aliens, they knew the base's defenses were set to repel intruders. This would not be a simple heist. Laria signaled to her team, signaling to take cover behind a large metal wall. The alien soldiers were just ahead, their forms stalking forward, expecting an easy victory. They were wrong. The first blast of energy hit one of the enemy soldiers square in the chest, sending it careening backward into a wall with a sickening thud. Laria had her weapon up instantly, her aim sharp as ever. Clear the hallway. Move, she barked, charging forward. The team followed in tight formation, taking out alien after alien as they moved down the corridor. The sound of gunfire and energy blasts echoed through the cold, metal halls of the base, but there was no turning back now. Control rooms up ahead. Voss's voice crackled through the comms, a mix of urgency and focus in his tone. Laria, you're on point. Laria didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, charging down the winding halls toward their objective. Every step took them closer to the weapon that could obliterate them all. But Laria refused to be afraid. She couldn't afford fear, not when the fate of humanity rested on her shoulders. As she reached the door to the control room, Laria paused, signaling to her team to take cover. She glanced around, taking a deep breath. The door was thick, reinforced, nothing short of a blast would get through it. We'll have to cut our way in, she said, turning to one of her teammates, Sergeant Ilara, who carried the cutting gear. Ilara nodded, pulling out a small but powerful plasma torch. She knelt and began to work on the door's security lock, the high-pitched whine of the cutter filling the air. The rest of the team remained alert, scanning the hallways for incoming enemies. The tension was unbearable, the silence broken only by the sound of Ilara's tool. A few minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Almost there, Ilara muttered, sweat dripping down her forehead. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out from behind them. Laria's heart skipped. Ambush, she yelled. Get ready. Alien soldiers poured into the hallway, their weapons drawn and firing. The team immediately sprang into action, returning fire as they took cover. Laria fired off a few quick shots, knocking down 2 soldiers with precise hits, but there were too many of them. The shuttle had given them a chance to get inside, but now they were trapped. Ilara, Laria shouted, we need that door open now. The sergeant worked faster, the plasma cutter's hum growing louder. Just another. Before she could finish, the door slammed open with a sudden hiss. Laria led the charge, moving through the doorway and into the control room. The space was enormous as control panels hummed with alien energy, the walls lined with towering machinery. At the far end of the room, a massive, pulsing sphere glowed with an eerie light, the weapon. Laria's heart skipped. There it is. She barely had time to think before an alien officer appeared at the far end of the room, flanked by 2 heavily armored soldiers. The officer raised a weapon, his eyes narrowing in hatred. Stop them, he bellowed. Laria moved faster than she'd ever moved before. With a roar, she threw herself toward the control panel, firing off a few rounds as she ran. The alien soldiers returned fire, but she ducked behind one of the central consoles and charged forward, rolling over the ground. Ilara was already at the panel, frantically typing in commands, trying to override the security system. The air was thick with tension as the enemy closed in. Ilara, get it done, Laria shouted, her voice full of urgency. A sudden explosion shook the room. An alien grenade had gone off near the entrance. The blast threw one of the soldiers into a nearby wall, but it also sent Ilara sprawling, her hand slipping off the controls. The weapon was still powering up. Laria didn't think. She leaped forward, knocking the enemy soldiers aside, pushing through pain and fatigue. In a single, fluid motion, she grabbed the alien officer's weapon, wrenching it from his hand, and fired it at the control panel. There was a crackling sound, then silence. The weapon sputtered and died, the lights in the room flickered, and the high-pitched hum of energy dropped to nothing. Laria stood, panting, her chest heaving as she surveyed the damage. She looked around at the control room, her breath still coming in sharp gasps. It was over. They had done it. Weapons down, Laria said into the comms. We've secured it. Let's get out of here. Her team gathered around her, nodding. The battle wasn't over, but it was a victory. The aliens had underestimated them, underestimated humanity. Laria stood tall, her gaze focused ahead. They had stopped the weapon, but there was still work to be done. Humans don't give up that easily. And today, humanity had won. The air inside the alien base was thick with the aftermath of the explosion. The lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows over the control room. Laria stood, surveying the wreckage as her team regrouped. Their mission had been a success, the weapon was down, but the cost of getting this far was not lost on her. They had barely made it through. Captain, we've got incoming reinforcements, LT, Reynolds reported, his voice tight with urgency. Looks like the entire base is going on high alert. We need to move, now. Laria's heart skipped. The aliens had probably been monitoring their every move. Their time was running out. The blast had disrupted the security systems temporarily, but they would come back online soon, and when they did, the base would be locked down tight. Ilara, can you reset the comms? Laria asked, glancing over at the sergeant, who was still working to stabilize the control panel. We need to send a distress signal to the fleet, now. Ilara nodded, her hands flying over the broken panel. On it. Just give me a few seconds. Voss, Laria called into the comms. We're sending the signal, but we've got incoming. I need you to pick us up immediately. We're on our way. Laria, just hold tight, came the captain's response, crackling through the comms. A blast echoed in the distance, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps, alien soldiers, closing in fast. We don't have a few seconds, Laria muttered, her pulse quickening. She could feel the weight of the seconds slipping away, as though time itself was working against them. Ilara's hands paused, and she looked up, eyes wide. Distress signals sent, but I've detected a secondary comm channel. Something larger is coming. They're bringing in a warship. Laria's stomach tightened. Great, she muttered under her breath. That's just what we needed. With a deep breath, she glanced at the rest of her team. We need to get to the extraction point now. Move, move, move. The squad rushed out of the control room, weapons raised. The corridors of the base seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in with every step. The sound of alien footsteps grew louder, and Laria could hear the echoes of their harsh, guttural voices, calling out orders, searching for intruders. They were closing in on their position. Take cover, Laria ordered as they rounded a corner, narrowly avoiding a volley of shots fired by the advancing enemy. The squad dropped behind the nearest cover, metal crates, rubble, anything they could use to shield themselves. The enemy soldiers, heavily armored and ruthless, advanced with calculated precision. Laria's heart pounded in her chest as she peered out from behind the crate, looking for a way to turn the tables. The alien soldiers weren't stupid. They knew exactly where they were, and they were cornering them in. We can't hold them off forever, Ilara said, her voice low, barely audible over the noise of gunfire. Laria's mind raced. They couldn't keep playing defense. They needed to break through, get to the extraction point, and get out before the warship arrived and they were overwhelmed. She turned to Voss's voice in her earpiece. Captain, how far are you? We need that extraction now. We're less than 5 minutes out. Laria, Voss replied, but we're going to have to fight our way in. We've got a lot of ships circling, alien reinforcements are coming in from all directions. Laria gritted her teeth. Understood. We're holding the line here. We'll meet you at the landing zone. Hold fast, Voss said, his voice full of grim determination. We'll be there. You just keep them off you. As the seconds ticked by, the intensity of the battle increased. Alien soldiers stormed their position, weapons firing in all directions. Laria's squad returned fire. keeping the enemy at bay. But the pressure was mounting. They couldn't hold out much longer. Ilara, do you have anything left in that plasma cutter? Laria asked, desperation creeping into her voice. We need a way through. Ilara glanced up, sweat dripping down her face, but her eyes were focused. I can try to cut through a wall, but it's going to be slow, and the enemy's going to catch up before we can make a full escape. A sudden idea flashed through Laria's mind. If they couldn't escape through the door, they'd have to make a way through the ceiling. Try the ceiling. If we cut straight up, we can drop down into the lower levels. It'll get us out of the line of sight. Ilara nodded, already moving into position with the plasma cutter on it. Laria's heart beat faster as she scanned the hallway, watching the enemy soldiers move closer. They couldn't afford a single misstep now. The pressure was building like a crushing weight. A shot rang out, striking the wall right next to her, the impact sending debris flying. Laria ducked instinctively, her mind sharp with focus. We're almost there, Ilara. Just a little longer. She knew they couldn't wait. The alien warship was nearing, and once it arrived, they wouldn't stand a chance. Suddenly, the ceiling above them cracked, and a wide gap formed. Ilara's plasma cutter had done its job. Let's go, Laria shouted. One by one, the squad members climbed through the hole, into the dimly lit maintenance tunnels above. As Laria pulled herself through, she felt the rush of air and a surge of relief. They were out of the main path, but the battle wasn't over. Stay low and move fast, Laria instructed, her voice steady, even though her mind was racing. They had to make it to the rendezvous point. The shuttle would be their only way out. The tunnels twisted, leading them deeper into the labyrinthine structure. There were no maps, only their instincts and the mission. Every step forward felt like a victory, but the air was thick with tension. They still had to avoid detection, outmaneuver the reinforcements, and get to the extraction point before the warship arrived. They moved quickly, as quietly as they could, their footsteps echoing faintly in the darkness. And then, in the distance, Laria saw the glimmer of hope, a light, the extraction point. We're almost there, Laria whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But just as they reached the final bend, an explosion shook the corridor, knocking them off their feet. The blast was deafening, and the heat from it scorched the air. For a moment, everything was chaos. Stay down, Laria shouted, adrenaline surging through her body. The squad huddled together, waiting for the smoke to clear. The alien warship had arrived, and they could hear the sound of its heavy engines rumbling through the walls. But they couldn't stop now. Laria raised her head, scanning the smoke-filled tunnel ahead. Move. We fight our way out if we have to. The shuttle's on its way. The final push was ahead of them. They could hear the shuttle's engines in the distance, the sound of salvation. They had made it this far. They weren't going to stop now. Humans don't give up that easily. And they would fight until the very last breath.